All right, so today we're going to look at westward expansion, manifest destiny, and then just this general idea of moving out west. And it's a lot to look at today, so let's go ahead and get started right away with looking at what manifest destiny is. And we're going to look at this picture here. And in this picture, we're really, this is, if you look closely at this picture, you'll see that there is a lot going on in this picture that really kind of explains this whole idea of manifest destiny. So if you kind of start on the left, you see things, and then as you move to the right, so the left is the far west. Everybody is moving that direction. Left is west on the map, and as you move across, you can just see a change in what's going on. And so if we start on the left, you can see on the very edge, you can see Buffalo, and you can see Native Americans, and so it is. You can see, and they're having to move further and further west. So that's one thing. But let's just pick out transportation, for example. So if we look here on the left, we see the Native Americans with their travois, a sled type thing that's being pulled by the horse there. And then as you move further to your right, you see a wagon that is being pulled. And then you see a Pony Express rider. And so those are advances over perhaps the travois. And then you've got the stagecoach. And so you see, once again, even maybe another advancement in westward movement and in transportation. And then finally you go all the way to the right and you see railroads. And railroads are obviously much, much faster. And so what we've got here is a painting that's showing a progression of technological advancements as far as transportation goes. Well, obviously that shows also who has the least advanced technology. It shows the Native Americans with the least advanced. And so in a sense, this is showing the superiority of the American ways, or the white ways of doing things, is the way it would have been seen at the time. So that's one thing that we see here in this picture. But there's so many other things going on in this picture as well. You see the Native Americans are shown more as hunters with kind of bows and arrows and spears and things like that. And the buffalo are running kind of that direction. And then what's replacing them? Well, we see frontiersmen there on a horse and with a shovel and things like that. And behind them, farmers. And so we see that the progress from hunters and gatherers to frontiersmen and then farmers being kind of a better choice in the minds of Americans at this time. So that's another thing that we see going. And then you obviously can't miss the woman in the center at the foreground of the picture. And in her right arm she has a book, and it's called The Common School, and so it's showing these ideas of schooling, of education, of the enlightenment, of Americans being enlightened, and so she is moving west and bringing with her enlightenment, and not only is she doing that through a book, through the printed book, through words, but also in her left hand, and actually wrapped around her right arm as well, is you see a telegraph line. And so we haven't talked a lot about the telegraph yet, but Samuel Morse invents the telegraph, and it's kind of the very beginning of this, what you use, cell phones and text messaging and Kik and all these different applications. Well, the telegraph is kind of the beginning of that. And this progress is moving west as well with everything else that's moving west. And so what's going on here is what we see in this picture is this idea of manifest destiny, this idea that people, the Americans, are bringing westward their culture, their ideas, their ways of doing things. And one of the other things that you notice in this picture is that the left side is darker and the right side is brighter and clear and more like daylight, and you can see the sun rising. And so that is kind of the idea here, is that American culture, American ways of doing things are moving west, and it's illuminating the darkness that is there before them. And so it's clearly this idea of their ways of doing things are better, which is exactly the way they thought then. It's kind of the way we tend to think now even. We tend to think of our ways as the best ways always. Whoever we are, that's the way people are. Although today we've had more of an appreciation for a diversity of culture and a diversity of ways of doing things, still we tend to think of our own ways as the best. So just to be clear, what was the belief of Manifest Destiny? That the United States would stretch from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, and as we do that, we're stretching west and bringing our culture and our ways of doing things with us. Okay, so that's kind of the basic idea. Let's get down to some specifics now. All right, so we're going to look at pioneers moving west to Oregon for land, the Oregon Trail. Some of you have played that game, Oregon Trail, before, and it's a good game. Lots of people like, and it shows some good aspects of it. But we're not going to get into all that. We will talk about why our settlers are moving out that direction, what they're looking for. And then we'll move on to other topics as well. So Oregon, just first off, Oregon is not just the state that it is today. There's a whole territory that makes up Oregon, Washington, Idaho, parts of Wyoming and Montana, and even Western Canada would have been part of that Oregon territory or Oregon country. And settlers were moving out there for fertile soil, mild temperatures, lots of rainfall, and fur trappers were moving out there. It's a territory that was it's just excellent territory for growing things and for all right, so they just continued to, it was just a territory that was ready. Sorry, I got interrupted there, so I may have repeated myself a little bit here. It was just territory that was ready to be settled in a lot of ways, in a lot of minds of Americans, because it was just great for growing things, but there was also lots of forest for trees, so there's lots of trees there where that's a valuable resource, not just for hunting, certainly, but also just, the tree itself, the wood itself is a very valuable resource that's being used a lot. And so this area has a lot of great natural resources. Lots of people are also, lots of different countries are laying claim to this territory. And so Americans moving out there will give Americans a stronger claim to that land. And lots of Americans also, we have talked about this. You should know about this a great deal more than some of the others because of last year you took Texas history. But Southern Americans are moving to Texas. A few of them, start moving in the 1820s, before Texas was even a part of the United States. It was first part of Mexico, and so a lot of Americans are moving there in the 1820s, and then in the early 1830s, and then Texas gains independence in 1836, as you know, and that coincides right with economic depression in the United States. So lots of people having problems in the United States start moving to Texas because there's a chance for cheap land and a new start, getting away from old debts. And so in the later 1830s and early 1840s, Americans are moving there as well. And as you know, then it becomes a part of the United States. Texas joins the United States and becomes a state and is no longer its own country. And so once again, now there's certainly still continuing to be many Americans moving there. Primarily, this is going to be Southerners. It's almost all cotton farmers. One of the big debates that sometimes you'll hear people talking about is Texas a southern state or is Texas a western state? Well, and there's certainly Texas is large enough to where it has certain aspects of both, but especially in these early days, Texas is very southern in that it is almost all cotton farming, plantations, and slave owners moving out there. There's a few exceptions to that. There's lots of Germans, as you know, that moved there, but a large majority, the vast majority of the people that move there are moving there from the southern United States, and they are cotton farmers, and so that is the earliest days of American settlement in Texas is certainly primarily southern. And the next step we have here is the Mexican Cession and the Gadsden Purchase. Here you can see on this map. So one of the things you see is the striped line, which it says is the Republic of Texas, and then there's this other much larger territory that you can see here. All of this is, hold on a second here. All of this territory here, which is what we kind of traditionally also add, so all of this as being the Republic of Texas, well, that territory is what Texas says was part of Texas during the Republic of Texas days, and also what the United States, once the United States adds in Texas, that is what the United States said was Texas, but Mexico didn't. And so that dispute over the border leads to the Mexican War. Well, at the end of we'll talk more about the Mexican War in class, but at the end of the Mexican War, the United States wins, Mexico loses, and therefore Mexico has to cede or give this huge territory to the United States. And so all of this is the Mexican Cession. Well, that also settles the dispute over Texas. So now Mexico recognizes the rest of Texas and all of Texas as no longer part of Mexico and a separate part of the United States now. And that's the result of the Mexican War. And so it's a huge territory. It's the Southwest. It is the area of the United States that, as you can see on the map, California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming are all, or at least parts of those two states. All of this is these present-day states, this territory. So we're talking about huge portion of land. And it's going to really change the face of the United States. And so we can see now by the 1848, when we've gained this territory, the United States has almost completely gained all of the territory that will be our 48 contiguous states. Alaska is not part of the United States yet. Hawaii is not part of the United States yet, but these territories are, and there's just little more land here at the bottom here. You can see this little bit darker territory right here. That is known as the Gadsden Purchase, and that purchase was made in 1853. The United States wanted that territory to run a railroad through there, and so the Mexico agreed to sell that territory to the United States in 1853. If I'm remembering right, it was Santa Anna once again back in power in Mexico that agreed to sell that land to the United States, and many people in Mexico were not very happy about that, and I think he ends up losing power again. Santa Anna, interesting guy, comes in and out of power in Mexico time and time again. So once the United States gains that territory, more and more people are going to move out there. And most of us, I think you remember the reason why they moved there. They're moving there for gold. You can see here pictures of, he's got these miners that are moving out west. They're looking for gold. And actually, relatively few people actually made any money finding gold. I mean, a few people did make lots of money, but most people did not. they end up making money in other ways. They end up finding other jobs and doing other things, farming or providing supplies for miners and other people. So most people don't strike it rich in California. Those that do make money, most of them actually make it some other way other than finding gold. But a few people did find gold and make lots of money, but it was not a huge number. And so California is going to go from part of Mexico to part of the United States to its own state in a very brief amount of time, in just a matter of years. And so it's a rapidly growing state at that time, and it's never really stopped rapidly growing until more recently, because it is today our largest state, more people in California than any other state. And it didn't start off that way, but it did grow rapidly, and now it is our largest state in the Union. Okay, I lost my picture here that I had on here. But so let me tell you a little bit about the Mormons first. So the Mormons are founded, or it's also known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're founded by Joseph Smith, and actually not out west, but actually in upstate New York. And from there's some conflict, and so they have conflict with some of their neighbors and end up moving several times. They moved to Ohio, and then to Missouri, and then to Illinois. And it's there where an angry mob kind of kills Joseph Smith. There's conflict, and so a new leader steps forward named Brigham Young. And he realizes, hey, we've got to do something. Everywhere we're going, we're having conflicts, so we need to move where there's not a lot of people. And so he decides, hey, we're going to move out to the Valley of the Great Salt Lake, which is present-day Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. And so he leads an advance party out there to the Great Salt Lake, and then thousands more Mormons or members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints move out there in the 1840s, 1847, and then 1848 and after that. And so that is why Utah, that is how Utah is mainly settled initially. Lots and lots of members of this church moved there, and still today it is the home of the Mormon Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so we're seeing the complete settlement of the Western territories beginning during this time. And so the Texas and some in the 1830s, and Oregon 1830s, 1840s, California the late 1840s, Utah in the late 1840s, and we're just seeing the settlement of the West. And so that is Westward Movement and Manifest Destiny.